Hey everybody, and welcome back. Now just to review before we move on a little bit, we have built function expressions and assigned them to variables and then called the new variable, like we did here with some cupcakes. And then the next thing that we did was we had an array full of values, and then we built a function expression itself as a parameter for the map method. When we passed that function to the map method applied our function to every cell of our array and then built a new array as a result. You can see that here with our juices. So now what we're going to look at is how to return a function from a function using function expressions. So say we had a mystery function. Ooh, spooky. And then in there we had some mystery code that we did a bunch of stuff, and then at the very end we returned a function expression. That's what we're going to be looking at right now. Let's check out how we can return functions from functions using our special ticket system for our Forest of Function Expressions theme park. Now within that, we'll use an array as a queue for fast pass delivery. Let's check out the arrays that we start with here. We've got a park rides array. Now inside our park rides array, we have subarrays, 4 of them to be exact. And in each subarray, we see the ride's name as well as the time that a customer currently would be estimated to wait for that ride. So you can see Birch Bumpers has a 40-minute wait, Pines Plunge has a 55-minute wait, etc. Next we have a fast pass queue. Now fast passes are organized according to whichever fast pass is available next, immediately next in time. So the very first index of our fast pass queue shows Cedar Coaster, and that's because the very first fast pass that's available is for Cedar Coaster. And then it would go Pines Plunge, then Birch Bumpers, and then Pines Plunge again. Before we move on, we have to kind of understand how a queue operates. So we're first going to build our queue as we see it here. The first cell that would be in our queue would be Cedar Coaster. Let's say that that's what we wanted to have as our first fast pass. And then what if we wanted to add Pines Plunge to our queue? New items in a queue are always added at the very end of the array that represents the queue. Just like in real life, when you get into a line, you go to the back of the line to be added to the line. Now we'll add Birch Bumpers onto the queue. But wait, we know a method that adds cells to the back of arrays, so what would we be using here actually in order to get that cell onto the back? That's the push method for arrays. So you can see that if we add Pines Plunge with a push, it will go right to the back of our queue. So now we've built the queue that we see in our array, but we need a way to get the very first cell off of the queue, right? Because that's how lines empty from the front, but we don't have that method yet. Guess what? Arrays have a very specific method for that process. That's called the shift method. When we call the shift method on any array, what happens is the very first cell of the array gets popped off the front and returned. So here you can see that if we called the shift method on our fast pass queue, the very first cell would be chopped right off, which holds Cedar Coaster, and Cedar Coaster would be returned. So that shortens our queue just a little bit, right? What would happen if we called the length of our array? We can see that that will yield a 3. And that's because the shift method, just like pop and just like push, will modify the length of the array automatically. Now shift is cool because you can pop the front of the queue off, but also store the result because it will pass back the result. It doesn't just let it fly away. So then if we were to shift again on our fast pass queue, the first cell would get popped off and we can store it inside of a new variable that we'll call first fast pass. If we console log that variable out, we will see Pines Plunge returned as the result. An important thing to note here about shift is that it's always going to return this first cell, regardless of whether you toss it away, like on the left-hand side here where we just called shift and got Cedar Coaster, or whether you store it in a variable and then use it for something. Now we're going to go ahead and use our queue to build our simple ticket system. Let's check it out. So like we said before, functions can return functions. It's a very important thing about JavaScript. Since functions can be treated as expressions, we can return them like values. So in our new ticket system, we will have a function called buildTicket. And that will take in 3 parameters, the first of which we will call allRides. Now this will be the array of our rides, and of course their wait times too. Then we will have a second parameter called passRides. This will be the array of all of those FastPass rides in order. Lastly, we will have the pick variable parameter, which will be the actual ride for which our customer would like a ticket. First thing we'll do is check to see if the very first FastPass that's available, found in passRides index 0, is the same as the customer's pick. And if that's true, we'll just shift the very first cell off of our FastPass array and give it to a variable called pass. Then we will return a function expression that alerts quick, you have a FastPass to whatever ride they just got a pass for. Notice here that we're treating the function as an expression and returning it directly. It's not stored in a variable, nothing like that. It's just immediately returned as a function expression. Then, if the very first FastPass is not the one they're looking for, then what we're going to do is cycle through the entire rides array, all of the rides with their wait times. And inside that loop, we'll check whether the first index in each subarray matches the name of the ride the customer would like to have. And when it does, we will return a different function. This one says, a ticket is printing for the ride, and your wait time is about a certain amount of minutes. Now notice that the minutes are contained in the second index, which is the index 1, of each of the subarrays in our array of rides. So now we know what our buildTicket function does. Let's see what we can do with it. If we establish a variable called wantsRide, that's the customer's wanted or desired ride, we have Birch bumpers assigned to that right now, then we will create a new variable called ticket, to which we will assign the results of our buildTicket function. Notice that we have called this buildTicket function with the following parameters. ParkRides, our array of rides, the FastPass queue, which has all of our FastPasses in it, as well as the wantsRide variable, which has the customer's desired ride in it. And then later, when we call the actual ticket function, perhaps when the customer has closed out of the ticket terminal, we would need to put a set of parentheses on that variable and a semicolon in order to let JavaScript know that we want to call that variable as the actual function that it contains. And as a cool result, we get our pop-up that says, this is your ticket to Birch Bumpers. Your wait time is about 40 minutes. Now, why did we get this particular alert? It's because Birch Bumpers was not the very first ride in our FastPass array, and so we went ahead and issued that customer a ticket for the ride that they actually wanted. Now what happens when we change that ride to Cedar Coaster, which is the very first ride in our FastPass array? Well, when we call ticket this time, we'll see, quick, you've got a FastPass to Cedar Coaster. Additionally, once that FastPass to Cedar Coaster has been printed, our FastPass queue will be shortened by 1 cell. Now, up to now, we have been storing our returned functions inside of a variable. JavaScript has a cool situation where you can immediately call the function when it is returned. Let's take a look at that. So this time, we want Pines Plunge. Again, you can see that that is the very first FastPass in our queue now. So now we're going to allow our ticket variable to disappear. We're not going to use that anymore. And we're going to scoot our buildTicket function over, still using the same parameters. But what happens when we just call the buildTicket function without returning it to anything? Well, what happens is it returns the function that it builds only. There you can see the entire body of the function as an expression that has been returned from buildTicket. And nothing happens. Now, even though we got this function returned from buildTicket, nothing has actually called the function that got returned. Now, if you look inside that function body, you can see the pass variable. The contents of that pass variable are saved in a process that's called closure. And we're going to look at that in the next level. But for now, you just know that inside of this function body, we have the first available FastPass, which is Pines Plunge. So again, we've got this function expression, but we need more in order to call that function expression immediately. So let's see what we need. Well, if we scoot our semicolon out a little bit, and then we swish in some parameter parentheses, then the same thing would happen to our returned expression. It would also get some parentheses. So now we're kind of on the right track. We're getting closer to calling it. And once we scoot our semicolon back in, then our function expression with its parameter parentheses and its semicolon becomes an immediately invoked function. When that happens, what do we get? Quick, you've got a fast pass to Pine's Plunge. How awesome is that? An immediately invoked function, no variable necessary. And our fast pass queue shortens right up. And now, just a few more challenges until you have received the badge for level 1. How awesome. We'll see you back for level 2. Your enters. Did I say new or false? New or false? Then we will check to look. Take 1 billion.